And I can see this just being so corrupted that, like, I could see the totally non-Christian person that just wants to take out somebody that's a, like, even a business competitor. It's like, oh, well, just accuse them of being a witch.
Sure. And actually, back to answering the first part of your question, Kirk. The state of Christianity then uh, was described actually by Martin Luther. I just read this recently, and I was just shocked how Luther described the typical Sunday service. It was not well populated, and many who came late, or left when the sermon started. And while they were there, they were either sleeping or burping or farting. I mean, it was nothing like what we're expecting. It wasn't like they were sitting in these beautiful cathedrals with Gregorian chants happening around them, and it was all beautiful, majestic worship of God. It was the peasants in the local church, and with pastors on the Protestant side, priests on the Catholic side, who may not be all that well educated in some cases. And so the discipleship happening among Christian church, I think, was very minimal, except for those that actually, were on the path to become clergy, and then they had very good education, but the gap was just huge. And so you don't have theologically astute people here, and you don't have people, I don't think, whose lives have been transformed very much by the
at
Spirit of
all.
God at all. Even. Yeah.
One of the things that I have often noticed, and I just see it again today in somebody's tweet, the culture today tends to see and talk about Christians as one monolithic entity. And here's what the Christians do, and here's what they have done. But in reality, it's just a massive spectrum from one extreme to the next. And like it reminds me of something Jesus said, that there'll be many on the last days when they stand before God who say, Lord, didn't we do this and that? And, religious activities. And he'll say, I never knew you, you who practice lawlessness. And so I think one of the take homes here is that we have to be extremely careful, and our culture needs to be called on treating Christianity as a monolithic thing when they don't understand what authentic Christianity is. And authentic Christianity would be basically defined by Christ, as opposed to everything else that people do who would maybe self-identify as Christian because, in the 1600s, what else was there in Europe? I mean, of course I was a Christian, so to speak, but what I did during the week is, wow, it would be hard pressed. I would, it's not up to me to decide who's a Christian and who's not. But Jesus did say you will know them by their fruit. And it doesn't sound like there was a lot of fruit here in the general population.
Yeah, not as much as we would hope. And that didn't change much even up into the 18th and 19th century. I read descriptions of what church life was like even then. And it wasn't much different than what Luther described in the 16th century. And that's why there was such a need for revivals, even a couple hundred years after the Reformation, and
I've been to a lot of churches in my life, and there's been a few that I would say are very similar to what Martin was describing there. Maybe not as blatantly gross, but there's a lot of sleepy town churches around.
Yeah, well, we won't talk about what we won't talk about falling asleep in church.
Yeah, I don't want to really point too many fingers here, because one of the things I've wrestled with in this study is recognizing that even though what you said is true, Kirk, that there's authentic Christianity and a whole lot of people who call themselves Christians maybe aren't very authentic, but there is no doubt in all these bad things that Christians have done, we were looking at, that some real Christians have done them. And the point that we've made in the past is that Yes, real Christians have done them, but when they do, they are following their own sinful natures, and or very often the culture that they happen to be in, rather than the teaching of the scripture. And we're going to get to that that's the bottom line in this thing too. We're going to ask that question and try to answer it. Is the teaching of Christianity the cause of the witch craze? And we'll answer that in a few minutes.